When an old pub landlord is at his wit's end and is feeling pretty desperate, well, you know what they say. Desperate times often call for desperate measures. And in this case, the Wayfarers Rest, the pub of which Bob is the landlord, the custodian, it's got a dark past. The place is definitely haunted. All day and night there are bangs, whispers, voices and screams, and they seem to emulate from the walls of the old stone pub. And that tends to keep the customers away and Bob awake. He's tried a number of things. He's tried an exorcism without any success. And now he's calling in a paranormal investigation team to see if they can do something to rid this place of the awful stench and the possession that clearly lies within. This is That Scary Bloke, and I hope you enjoy the short ghost stories from the dark side coming your way. The fog, thick and grey as old dishwater, clung to the desolate curves of Bodmin Moor, swallowing the last vestiges of twilight. It was a kind of mist that didn't just obscure sight, but it also muffled sound, creating an oppressive quiet, really, unbroken by the mournful bleating of unseen sheep and the distant, unseen rush of wind over the granite. Nestled, like a forgotten tooth in the gums of this ancient landscape, stood the Wayfarers Rest, a pub whose stone walls seemed to absorb all light and cheer, exuding instead a damp, unsettling chill. Inside, Bob Sykes, the landlord and reluctant custodian of the Wayfarers Rest, nervously polished a glass. The pub was empty. Well, it had been for most of the evening, in fact. Not even the most hardened local dared brave the moor's embrace in this weather, let alone the increasingly unsettling atmosphere within the pub, which was frankly keeping people away. Bob, a man whose frame had once stood as robust as an oak, was now stooped. He was stooped with worry and weariness. He ran a hand through his thinning grey hair. He'd tried everything: salt lines, old tales of warding, even a shaky attempt at an exorcism. And that was with a half-remembered prayer from his grandmother, but nothing worked. In fact, things seemed to be getting worse down at the Wayfarers Rest, and Bob was becoming more and more unsettled. That's why he called them the Solstice Paranormal Research Team. Bob wasn't a man given to flights of fancy, but desperation had driven him to the internet and then eventually onto Gillian Jones. A faint rumble of an engine, the headlights cutting briefly through the fog, announced the arrival of the team. Bob's heart thumped a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He watched as a battered-looking but actually surprisingly well-equipped van pulled into the cobbled yard. Three figures emerged, cloaked in waterproofs. Their faces were grimly pragmatic. First out was Gillian Jones, the team's chief investigator. She was a woman in her late 30s, sharp-eyed, with a no-nonsense bob of dark hair, and the presence it was both authoritative but also calmly reassuring. She carried herself with the air of someone who had seen things, experienced things, and she certainly approached the unknown with a blend of scientific rigour and respectful curiosity. Behind her was Stephen Amos. Ian folded himself from the passenger seat. Stephen was a team's medium, a man whose quiet demeanour masked a profound sensitivity. Slightly older than Gillian, in his early 40s, he had an artistic, almost ethereal quality about him, with deep-set eyes that seemed to constantly scan not just the physical world, but the spaces in between. He shivered, despite his heavy coat, casting an intuitive glance at the pub's looming silhouette. The last member of the team was Stuart Haycock. He was the technical expert, and Stuart was a sort of whirlwind of wires, really. Cameras, gadgets, and you name it, he had it. His movements, in fact, were very precise, and they were extremely efficient, especially in this thick fog. So approaching 40, with a neatly trimmed beard and glasses that perpetually slid down his nose, he looked more like a university lecturer than someone who spent most of his nights hunting for ghosts. He was already pulling equipment cases from the back of the van, with a methodical hum of purpose about him. Mr. Sykes, I presume. Gillian's voice was clear, cutting through the damp air as she extended a gloved hand. Her grip was firm. Gillian Jones, Solstice Paranormal. This is Stephen Amos and Stuart Haycock. Bob nodded, ushering them inside. The warmth of the roaring fire was doing little to dispel the chill that seemed to emanate from the very stones of this pub. "Come in," he said. You must be frozen and the kettle's on." As they shed their outer layers, revealing varied logoed t-shirts and utility vests, Bob began to pour out his story. His voice was a low, urgent murmur. "It started small, you know. Just little things. A glass falling off the bar when no one was near. The feeling of someone watching you when the place was empty. You knew it was empty. There were cold spots, even when the fire was blazing." He wrung his hands. But then it got worse. Whispers, full-on bangs from the cellar. "A couple of weeks ago I found all the chairs in the snug were stacked neatly on the tables and all the doors were locked from the inside, so how on earth did that happen?" Also a real oppressive sadness at times. "Sometimes I swear I can see her. It's a woman, I think. She seems to be looking out of the window, but when I glance over, she's gone. Just in the peripheral vision and always by the window. And it's as though she's waiting." Stephen, who had been quietly taking in the surroundings of the pub at this point, his eyes sort of half closed, he shivered again. "She's waiting," he said. "Waiting for someone who isn't coming." Gillian shot Stephen an assessing glance and then turned back to Bob. "Thank you, Mr. Sykes," she said. "That gives us a good starting point. Stuart, if you could begin setting up the main cameras in the common room and the snug, and Stephen, perhaps you could do an initial sweep and see what else you can pick up as you wander around the place." Stuart was already assembling a tripod with a thermal camera and he nodded at Gillian. He said, "Yes, I'm on it, and the EVP recorders, they're going as well. We've got power running to all these devices. We're all set up. It won't take us long at all, Gillian." For the next hour, though, the Wayfarers Rest was transformed. Cables snaked across the floor, connecting cameras, motion sensors and audio recorders to a central hub in the quietest corner of the common room. Stuart moved with practiced efficiency, checking battery levels, adjusting lenses and calibrating sensors. Gillian, meanwhile, meticulously documented the layout of the pub, noting areas of reported activity and also taking the time to interview Bob still further about different occurrences and the times of these occurrences. Stephen, however, moved with a different kind of purpose. He walked slowly through the pub, his hands often reaching out, not quite touching, but hovering over surfaces like the old ancient oak bar and around the barrels in the cellar. He closed his eyes when he was in the snug, a deep frown creasing his brow. When he emerged, his face was pale. "There's a strong residual energy here," Stephen reported to Gillian, who was reviewing a floor plan. It's sadness mostly, and a deep sense of loneliness. But the cellar, that feels like a place of confinement, not just for storage. And that feeling that Bob mentioned, of someone waiting, it's potent in the snug, near the window. She's definitely there." "Can you get a clearer impression of her?" Gillian asked with her voice low. Stephen shook his head. No, not at the moment. A name, perhaps. Something like Elara or Eleanor. And the word betrayal. It's very old, whatever it is, but it's very strong. As darkness truly fell, Stuart connected the monitors, a faint green glow illuminating his face. "All right, team, everything's online now. We've got full coverage. We've got visual, thermal, audio and EMF. We're ready to go, and if anything breathes wrong in here, we're going to know about it." Gillian gave a rare, tight smile. "Excellent. Let's do a lights out session, starting in the common room. Bob, if you wouldn't mind joining us, but please try to remain quiet unless directly addressed." The pub plunged into an inky blackness, disturbed only by the red pinpricks of camera lights and the faint glow from Stuart's monitoring station. The air grew heavy, thick with anticipation, and Gillian sat at a small table, her voice calm and clear in this oppressive silence. "We're not here to cause you any harm or distress," she began, addressing the unseen. "We're here to understand. If there is a presence here, we respectfully ask that you make yourselves known, and can you give us a sign, a knock or a touch perhaps?" Well, the silence stretched, broken only by the hum of equipment and the distant mournful cry of an owl. Minutes ticked by, slow and heavy. Bob squirmed in his seat. Suddenly a distinct clink came from the bar. All heads snapped towards the sound. Stuart, ever vigilant, checked his monitors. EMF spike near the bar, he said, and a thermal anomaly, a cold spot moving towards that corner, rapidly dropping to 3 degrees Celsius below ambient. Did you hear that? Bob whispered, his eyes wide. Was it a bottle, perhaps? Quiet, Bob, please, Gillian urged, her voice unwavering. Can you repeat that, please, and prove that you are here? From the far end of the bar, a small ceramic beer pump tap handle started to rotate on its own, deliberately slowly 90 degrees, and then stopped. Bob gasped, a small choke sound. Got it on camera one, Stuart hissed, a finger jabbing at the screen. Clear as day, no visible source though. Stephen closed his eyes, his breathing was shallow. She wants to be acknowledged, he murmured. She's agitated. And the name, it's stronger now. Eleanor. And there's a man, Robert. He's significant. Eleanor, Robert, Gillian repeated, filing the names away. Eleanor, is that your name? Are you waiting for Robert? A low, mournful sigh seemed to ripple through the room, chilling them to the bone, and then a small antique bell hanging over the common room door began to sway gently, though there was no breeze. It chimed a couple of times. A fragile, tinny sound that seemed to echo with centuries of sorrow. That's enough for now, Gillian said, her voice firm, breaking the tension. Stuart, lights up, please. Bob, thank you for your patience. As the pub was flooded with light once more, Bob looked utterly shaken. I've never seen anything quite like it, he said. It's never been this clear before. Well, it's a strong entity, Mr. Sykes, Gillian confirmed, reviewing the footage that Stuart had captured. Definitely intelligent as well, not just residual. And Stephen's impressions are consistent with what we've just witnessed. We have a good starting point. So day 2 began with a flurry of activity. While Stuart meticulously reviewed every frame of footage and every second of audio, he was isolating any anomalies that he found. But Gillian and Stephen began to delve into the history of the Wayfarers Rest. Bob Sykes was still reeling from the previous night, and he was offering them dusty old deeds and a local history book. But their research took them deep into the pub's past, consulting online archives and the small, musty local history section of the Bodmin Library. Now, the pub, formerly known as the Smuggler's Daughter in the 18th century, had a dark history. They found records of a young woman named Eleanor Pendarves. She was the daughter of the then landlord who had fallen in love with a charismatic but dangerous smuggler named Robert Trevone. He promised her the world, and Gillian read from an old parish record detailing a tragic local legend. He'd promised to take her away from this harsh life on the moor. He was going to take her across the seas to America, and she waited for him in the snug by the window for 3 nights during a terrible storm. But, yes, you guessed it, he never came. He was captured and hanged for smuggling at Bodmin Gaol, and Eleanor, well, she died of a broken heart a few weeks later. Some say by her own hand, others say from some mysterious illness, though it was more likely from despair. Betrayal, Stephen murmured, closing his eyes. That's what I felt, remember? Betrayal. The waiting. It's now all aligning perfectly. And the cellar, Stuart added, looking up from his laptop, it was used to store smuggled goods, perhaps even as a temporary prison for those who crossed the smugglers. The energy there, it's not Eleanor, but it's something much darker, more oppressive. It feels almost predatory. Gillian frowned, a new piece clicking into place. 2 distant presences then, she said. Eleanor, the tragic lover, and something else related to the smuggling. That could explain the shifting nature of the hauntings, Bob. The sadness, and then the more aggressive poltergeist-like activity, which obviously you've been very worried about. That evening, the team decided on a more direct approach. They would focus on Eleanor first, attempting to help her find peace. Stuart set up a projector, displaying an old map of Bodmin Moor from the 18th century, and Gillian plays an antique silver pocket watch on the table, hoping that it might act as some kind of focal point. Eleanor, Gillian began, in a gentle voice. We've learned your story. We know about Robert. We know also about your pain. And actually, we're here to help you. Robert's gone. He's not coming back now, but you don't have to be here waiting. Stephen, who was sitting opposite her, closed his eyes, his hands resting lightly on the table. Eleanor, he whispered, his voice taking on a different timbre, softer, more ancient. You are free. The sea journey, it was a lie. He didn't betray you out of malice, but it was out of circumstance. You see, he was caught, and he suffered too. An immediate coldness swept through the snug, more intense than anything they'd felt before. The projector flickered violently. A woman's figure, translucent and shimmering, appeared by the window, her back to them. Just as Bob had described, she was tall, slender, wearing a simple dark gown and a black veil. She stared out into the inky blackness of the moor. Her form was wavering like a heat haze. She's manifesting. Full apparition, Stuart breathed, his hands flying over his keyboard, capturing frames. Stephen gasped, his eyes still closed. She's trying to say something. No, she's not trying to say something. She's trying to show me. She's showing me. She showed me the day he left, the promise, the broken heart. A single tear tracked down Stephen's cheek. She's trapped in that moment, Gillian, that moment of endless waiting. Gillian's voice remained steady. Eleanor, look at us. Look at the pocket watch. It's time to let go of the pain. Robert wouldn't want you to suffer the way that you are. You are beautiful and you deserve to have peace. The figure at the window slowly, almost imperceptibly turned. Her face was indistinct, shrouded in a shadow and also in sadness, but the palpable despair that filled the room was overwhelming. A faint, almost inaudible sob echoed. Suddenly the common room behind them erupted, a deafening crash of breaking glass from the bar, followed by a guttural, angry roar that seemed to tear through the very fabric of the building. The air grew heavy and rancid, thick with menace. The temperature plummeted and the lights flickered wildly. Not Eleanor, Bob shrieked, pointing a trembling finger across there. That's not her, that's someone else. That's the other one. Stuart, his eyes wide with alarm, pointed at a screen showing the common room. EMF readings are through the roof now, he said, and something just moved the old strongbox in the corner. It was thrown. The ethereal form of Eleanor at the window wavered, her head tilting slightly, as if she too was startled by the sudden influx of this malevolent energy. Her form seemed to flicker, as if losing strength, or perhaps for the first time being truly disturbed from her endless vigil. He's protecting the pub. Protecting his stash, Stephen cried. His voice strained. He's angry. We're disturbing the peace of the dead, and he's angry that we're releasing her. Gillian, ever the leader, took charge. Stuart, focus everything on the common room, and Stephen, try to shield Eleanor if you can. Bob, stay with me. She stood facing the new threat. Her voice was cutting through the cacophony. We are not here to take your ill-gotten gains. We are here seeking peace. This pub is no longer yours to rule over. A growl, deep and resonant, vibrated through the floorboards. A heavy oak chair in the common room scraped violently across the floor, and then it flew with impossible force, smashing against the far wall, splintering into a million pieces. He's getting stronger, Stephen gasped, clutching his head. He knows that he's losing control. Gillian knew they couldn't fight raw poltergeist force without risking injury. They needed to sever the connection to make this entity understand its time was over. She remembered Bob's old deeds. Stuart, the original deed for the pub, where is it? Stuart, nimble despite the chaos, pointed to a dusty locket. In there. Bob keeps all the old papers in there. Bob, the key, Gillian commanded. As Bob fumbled for his key ring, Gillian turned back to the common room, her voice a shout over the din. This land is no longer yours, and the pub belongs to the living. You have no powers here. As Bob shakily unlocked the cabinet, a dark, shadowy figure seemed to coalesce near the bar, larger and more menacing than anything they'd seen. It was indistinct, but its presence was palpable. Radiating pure, unadulterated rage, it lunged towards them. Got it, Bob cried, thrusting a yellowed parchment scroll into Gillian's hand. Gillian sat with the deed at a table, her voice ringing with a newfound conviction. By the power vested in the current owner, I command you, release your hold. You are banished from this place. The Wayfarers Rest is not yours. As she spoke, the parchment seemed to glow faintly, an almost imperceptible light radiating from the ancient document. The shadowy figure faltered, recoiling. A choked, soundless scream seemed to tear through the air, and the temperature spiked and then instantly dropped to an extreme icy cold that left their breath like mist in the air. The lights in the pub went out completely. For a moment there was absolute darkness, absolute silence, and then, slowly, the power flickered back on. The common room was a mess, broken glass everywhere and a splintered chair, and of course the strongbox was lying open on the floor, but that heavy, oppressive feeling was gone. The rancid smell dissipated. The air, though still chilly, felt cleaner, lighter. Stuart's screens showed no more anomalous readings, the EMF meters stable, the thermal camera showing normal ambient temperatures. Gillian turned back to the snug. Eleanor's translucent form was still there by the window, but now, instead of despair, there was a faint, almost beatific smile on her face. She looked towards them, a gesture of gratitude. Then her form shimmered, elongated, and slowly, gently, faded into the stone walls, leaving behind only the lingering scent of lavender and a profound sense of peace. Stephen, exhausted but seemingly lighter, slumped into a chair. "She's gone," he whispered. "She's free. Your words, Gillian, and the release of the other, it's finally broke that connection." Bob Sykes stood amidst the wreckage of his pub, his mouth agape. "Bloody hell," he breathed, running a hand over a still intact table. It's quiet. It's properly quiet for the first time in years." Well, the team spent the rest of the night packing up their equipment, documenting the resolved cases and cleaning up the scattered debris. Stuart, ever the professional, had captured remarkable evidence, clear footage of the chair being thrown, the bell chiming, and of course that full apparition of Eleanor. As dawn approached, painting the edge of the moor in a soft grey and purple hues, the fog finally began to lift, revealing the stark, beautiful landscape. The Wayfarers Rest looked different in the morning light, less forbidding, more like a pub simply waiting for its next customer. "So, that's that then?" Bob asked, a hopeful tremor in his voice as he looked at Gillian. Gillian nodded. "Yes, we believe so, Mr. Sykes. Eleanor has moved on, and the other entity, the smuggler, has been effectively banished from the pub. The pub should feel much calmer now. We'll send you a full report with all of our findings." Stephen, by the door, took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. "No more waiting," he said, a gentle smile on his face. "Just peace." As the Solstice Paranormal Research team drove away, the moor mist slowly retreating, Bob Sykes stood in his doorway, a strange mixture of awe and relief on his face. The pub was quiet now, really quiet. And, for the first time in a long time, Bob felt like he could finally get a decent night's sleep. He looked up at the clearing sky and then back at the common room. Yes, he still had a lot of cleaning up to do for sure, but at least for the first time it felt much clearer, much cleaner, much quieter. And he didn't feel like he was alone anymore. The Wayfarers Rest was no longer just a pub. It was a place where two lost souls had finally found their home, and perhaps a new chapter for the old inn. So I do hope you've enjoyed that short ghost story from the dark side, and if you have, please do remember to hit the subscribe button, give me a thumbs up, and hit the notification bell so you will know when all of the videos are being released. Of course, if you don't,
that scary bloke may just come and find you. Sleep tight.